a servant is known more for their works than for the things that they say. And it sounds really simple and really obvious, but I mean, it's a really deep thing when you think about it. We're servants. The whole body of Christ is servants, but I think we can all agree that women serve a lot in their lifetime in things that they do to their husbands, and we're supposed to be a servant to our master, our Lord, and we feel like you are an eternal servant to your children. When you have a 1-year-old demanding raspberries in the morning, it really lowers your standards on who's in charge. And it's just, you're in service in the secular world with your boss at your job. Just everybody's a servant to somebody at some point. So I got to thinking a lot about servants, and whenever I'm thinking about a particular word, I like to see how much it actually is in the Bible. It's just a thing that I find interesting. I like when preachers do it, so I did it. For you all, servant is 462 times. Serve is 193, and service is 116 times. There were a bunch of other renditions of the word that we could use, but the list just would have went on and on. So a few honorable mentions, kind of some verses that we probably all know or have heard. Ephesians 6:5, servants, be obedient to them that are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling and singleness of heart as unto Christ. And Colossians 3:22, servants, obeying in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in singleness of heart, fearing God. As well as Titus 2:9, exhort servants to be obedient unto their own masters and to please them well in all things, not answering them. So those were just a few honorable mentions, but the text that I kind of want to springboard off of, and I will actually turn to, and hopefully give you guys enough time because you don't have it bookmarked, is Romans 6:16. And I'll be reading to verse number 22. Romans 6, and I said verse number 16. Yeah, I started reading verse number 1. Know ye not that to whom ye yield yourselves servants to obey, his servants ye are to whom ye obey, whether of sin unto death or obedience unto righteousness. But God be thanked that you were servants of sin, but ye have obeyed from the heart that form of doctrine which was delivered you. Being then made free from sin, you became the servants of righteousness. I speak after the manner of men because of the infirmity of your flesh. For as ye have yielded your members servants to uncleanness and to iniquity unto iniquity, even so now yield your members servants to righteousness unto holiness. For when you were the servants of sin, you were free from righteousness. What fruit had ye then in those things whereof ye are now ashamed? For the end of those things is death. But now being made free from sin and become servants to God, ye have your fruit unto holiness, and the end everlasting life. So, kind of just back to the point that we're all servants, and we are all judged by our actions, in that we are servants. A servant is known by who they serve, and your actions are dictated by the one to whom you are service to. You know, the verses were talking about how when you were a servant to sin and to death, you did things you were ashamed of, things that you don't want to talk about, you don't want to think about, but now you're free from that. You're free from that bondage. You have a good master. You have a good service that you do. And you know, Matthew 6:24 says, no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate one and love the other, or else he will hold to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. So A lot of being a servant has to do with your master because that dictates all of your actions. And like we said before, servants are known by their actions. At a funeral, we recall people's actions most of the time. When somebody's giving a speech or somebody comes up to talk, 9 times out of 10, you're not just going to list a bunch of things that person said. Obituaries are full of information about the way a person lived or the groups and organizations they were a part of. He or she loved the Lord. They made the best desserts at all the fellowships. They volunteered at the Red Cross. Children loved them. We often hear people say, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, or actions speak louder than words. So it's a truth. It's something that just rings true throughout our lives. Even in the secular world, when you often think of famous people, both past and present, whether they're an actor or a writer, an artist or a singer, we usually know them by their occupation or their service. You think of Leonardo da Vinci, you think the Mona Lisa. Mozart, classical music. Edgar Allan Poe, creepy novelist. Shakespeare, the tragic Romeo and Juliet. It rings true even in the secular world, but a lot of what I thought about when I was thinking about servants that are known more for what they do than what they say, I started thinking about all of the characters in the Bible that I could not think of one single thing that they said. I could think of a million things that they did, but I could not recall a single word that they said. And a really good example of this is if you ask any kid in the world, or in the church world, I guess not every kid, but if you ask any kid who King David is, they're probably going to say, he killed a giant. And most adults will say the same thing as well. Or they'll bring up Bathsheba or something along those lines, something David did. So Noah, the same way. He built an ark. Jesus's mother, Mary. Stephen died for the Lord. Jonah was swallowed by a great fish. We usually equate somebody in the Bible with whatever they did, whether good or bad. And we often describe an event that took place in their lives and the action that they committed with that event. Someone doesn't say, hey, you know Cain in the Bible, and you reply, yeah, Cain, I know not. I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? Or, do you know King David? I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. Or, for who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? For one, somebody's going to look at you like you're absolutely crazy because you're just quoting them, and they're probably going to have no idea what you're talking about. You usually, you'll bring up something they did. There's lots of characters in the Bible that we don't even know anything they said at all. Doesn't mean they didn't speak, but it just wasn't recorded because the important things were their actions. Noah, for example, can't find anywhere that he talks, just where he obeys the Lord, and then his later mess ups. But in Hebrews, my husband helped me think of this part. In Hebrews, he was talking about the hall of faith as how it's just a whole chapter of what people did. And we were talking about how by faith Abel offered to the Lord a more excellent sacrifice than Cain. And by his action, even in death he speaketh. His actions spoke louder than his words. And in Genesis 4, we know that Abel spoke to Cain because it says that they were talking, that they were having a conversation before Cain rose up. But there's no recording of what he said, only what he did. And he was not rewarded for what he said, but what he did. Even in death, he yet speaketh because of his actions. One of my favorite Bible stories, and another really good example of this, is the woman that washes Jesus' feet. And I particularly like in Luke 7, the recalling of that. So I was going to turn to the 7 and read verses 36 through 50. We have a post-it. But in Luke 7:36 through 50, it says, and one of the Pharisees desiring him that he would eat with them, he went to the Pharisee's house and sat down to meat. And behold, a woman in the city, which was a sinner, when she knew that Jesus sat at meat in the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster box of ointment, and stood at his feet behind him weeping, and began to wash his feet with tears, and did wipe them with the hairs of her head, and kissed his feet, and anointed them with ointment. Now when the Pharisee which had bidden him saw it, he spake within himself, saying, This man, if he were a prophet, would have known who and what manner of woman that toucheth him, for she is a sinner. And Jesus answering said unto him, Simon, I have somewhat to say to thee. And he saith, Master, say on. There was a certain creditor which had 2 debtors. The one owed 500 pence, and the other 50. And when they had nothing to pay, he frankly forgave them both. Tell me therefore, which of them will love him the most? Simon answered and said, I suppose that to whom was forgiven. And he said unto him, Thou hast righteously judged. And he turned to the woman and said unto Simon, Seest thou this woman? I entered into thine house. Thou gavest me no water for my feet, but she has washed my feet with her tears, and wiped them with the hairs of her head. Thou givest me no kiss, but this woman, since the time I came in, hath not ceased to kiss my feet. My head with oil thou didst not anoint, but this woman hath anointed my feet with ointment. Wherefore I say unto thee, her sins which are many are forgiven. For she loved much, but to whom little is forgiven, the same loveth little. And he said unto her, Thy sins are forgiven. And they that sat at meat with him began to say within themselves, Who is this that forgiveth sins also? And he said to the woman, Thy faith has saved thee, go in peace. And one of the reasons that this is one of my favorite stories, although there are many reasons it could be, is she doesn't speak for herself. The master speaks for her the whole time. She's a wonderful picture of a servant. We see Jesus washing his disciples' feet, and she washes Jesus' feet. I couldn't imagine. And she never speaks for herself. She must have known, just like everybody else, what the Lord was getting at. Even though the man spoke in his heart, she probably knew what everybody thought of her in there. And she kept quiet and let the master speak for her. And she is very well known amongst Bible believers for what she did. Another person that I am ashamed to say, I could not recall one thing that she said, and I knew she talked. I knew she did. I could, kind of pick out a couple things, and I was like, I know she said something along these lines, but I cannot remember verbatim. Is the mother of Jesus. We all know the mother of Jesus. We all know that she did speak. And we may know roughly what she said, but it is not what you think of when you think of Mary. And, she speaks quite a few times in Luke, and she speaks in John, and, but it's not what you think of when you think of her. And, there's lots of people in life, I'm sure, that you're thinking of right now that you can think of, wonderful and great things that they did. And when we were at Charity Mission and my husband was running the mission, we were still courting, and I spent a lot of time with my husband and the guys in the mission. We would have Ruckman Chalk Talk nights and stuff, and there was a man in the mission who nobody really liked him, but he was the best at cleaning. The men in the mission often helped pick up and clean for the meal services that we had every night. And his name was Greg, and you knew when Greg cleaned because he pulled everything out, he swept everything, he mopped everything, and I knew the moment that Greg left the mission because nothing was as clean as it was when he was there. And it has been years since I have seen Greg. But I think about him quite often when I mop because of his action of doing that. And it's crazy. I can't remember one thing that he said, but I will always remember how great of a cleaner that he was, which is a wonderful testimony at Charity Mission because it's pretty hard to clean up after that many people going in and out. It's sad to say, but there's a lot of people in the world today that don't know anything that Jesus said. A lot of us, we know because we grew up in church or we go to church or we read our Bible. There's a lot of people in churches that probably don't know, but there's a lot of people in the world that have no idea anything at all that Jesus said. And my husband and I were watching a YouTube video of a man that came up to I'd say late teens, early 20s, a couple, and he asked them, he said, any verse in the Bible, any version of the Bible, just quote to me any verse, and I'll pay you. And he held up, I forget how much he held up, but they both looked at him really stunned, and the woman goes, John 8? And he goes, but what does it say? And she goes, sorry, I just don't know. She couldn't think of one thing that the Bible says, not one. And but I guarantee you, if you asked her, I mean, she knew John was the book of the Bible, so I guarantee you, if you asked her at least one thing that Jesus said, she'd probably know. Most people in the secular world know that Jesus turned water into wine. They don't know why. They don't know what kind of wine. They use it for so many excuses, but they don't know the reasoning behind it. Most people know that somebody walked on the water. We've been trying to mimic it for years, and magicians and everybody trying to play a trick with it. They know people were healed in the Bible, and most people know that a cross has something to do with Jesus, that he died on. Catholic Church depicts it everywhere. But most of the time they don't know the reasons why for this, or what the Lord said during it. And, in life, I notice it's a lot of, the older you get, the more you pass down wisdom of things that people have actually said. And if you notice, children and immature people are more likely to remember actions over words. For instance, Stephen knew that Sister Sheila was giving him cookies while we were at the meeting. So he was very excited every time he saw Sister Sheila. Kids know when they go to Grandma's house, they get candy. They know if you let them sneak something. They just remember that. You remember as a kid when you go to a church and somebody talks to you and you're like, oh, we're friends. I'm cool with that person. They know, And, immature Christians, young Christians that come in, they'll remember things, how you made them feel. And, but as you get older, there's more stuff that's passed down through what people actually said, the actual wisdom of words. And I was thinking over, things that people have told me throughout my life where it was just actions, but those actions meant so much to them growing up. There's a woman in our church who she grew up mostly with her aunt and her uncle. But she was telling me one time, and keep in mind she's grown now. She has 4 kids of her own and a husband. And she was telling me about how she used to have to walk to school. And every morning her mom would put her clothes in the dryer so her jeans would be toasty on her walk to school. And she goes, sometimes I wake up in the morning and I wish that somebody would make my clothes toasty before I had to do my day. And it's been years since that's happened, but it's an action that comforted her and that she remembered. And my mom, my Nana, when she got saved, she was sitting on a stoop outside of her work in Florida, and a woman passed by and just held a tract down in front of her. She was just looking down at the ground, and a woman just held out a tract to her, and she didn't even look up at her. All she remembers is that woman's feet, and she had on some really cool looking socks. And that's all she knows of that lady. And but for the rest of her life, she's gonna remember the action of just that person just walking by and sticking that tract down in front of her face. And my husband preaches a message where he uses my Nana as an illustration and says that when she gets to heaven, she's going to be looking down at everybody's feet to look for that person that handed her that tract. And there's another woman that I know that she had a pretty rough bringing up, and they had to move a lot, and just her home life really wasn't stable. But I remember her telling me that her mom made everywhere feel like home. No matter where they lived, she always found something that was fun or something that was exciting or a cool place to go or a nice ice cream shop on the corner, somewhere that made it feel like this is comforting, this is home. And those were just all actions throughout people's lives that you just remember. And I started to think about, who remembers though what servants say? As a whole, as a majority, we all remember things that servants do. But I was trying to think of who exactly would remember what they say. So I thought, when I die, who's going to remember most what things that I actually said? And my first thought was my husband, obviously, because I spend so much time with him, and I talk to him so much. And, he would probably remember the most of things that I actually said. I would hope that my children would remember at least a few things that I said when I pass away. And, close friends and family. But I was thinking about what all those people have in common, and they're all people that serve with you. Sometimes you're serving them, sometimes they're serving beside you, but they're all people that are also servants. And I was just thinking, like, servants remember what other servants said, otherwise things wouldn't be passed on. A lot of war stories about things that people did that were great things in war, they're passed on by other soldiers, people serving with them. And a lot of things that we find out about great preachers or great women of God that have passed away are because somebody who was close to them and served with them wrote about them and passed down about them. Real servants who love the Lord, they know things that the Lord said, whether it's something that was recorded while he was here on earth, or something that was recorded because it was inspired by him, or something that he said to you personally in your devotions or in your prayer life. And people that you serve with and work with will remember things you said best. People you instruct, or people who value you, whether it's a Sunday school class, or your children, or your husband. I taught a Sunday school class at Amazing Grace, and I still have little kids coming up to me saying things that I said in class that I'm like, I don't remember that, but okay. I'm glad it was good that you remember. And so, when somebody looks up to you, they'll remember something you said. You'll remember things your pastor said for years, or preachers that you looked up to. And some examples of that, my pastor's wife that I grew up with, she passed away when I was about 13 years old, but my grandmother was one of the founding members of that church. So, her and Mama Hood were really, really good friends. And to this day, when she'll give me advice, a lot of the time it's that wisdom passed down from something Mama Hood actually said. And as her being one of the founding members, my mom was also there from a really young age. She was about 16 years old when she met the pastor and his wife, and her father had passed away when she was a teenager, so she looked up a lot to Pastor Hood, and a lot of the advice she gave me growing up was advice he gave her as a teenager. And there's a woman in our church that has she has 4 kids. She's 4 kids now. She's the woman with the toasty jeans story. She at the church she was at before, there was a woman in nursery that she got really close with, and I noticed that they're both very good women, and I noticed that a lot of stuff that she talks about is bringing up things that other woman said. A lot of parenting advice she'll give me is things that other woman said, because it's good stuff that helps, and it's being passed down. And me and my husband are people that I think of when I think of people serving together and knowing about each other. There are things that I know about my husband that nobody else knows, and things that he knows about me that nobody else knows. I probably won't write a book about him, but I don't know, we'll see. It could happen. So servants know servants. If you're having a hard time recalling things that other servants have said, or friends that maybe you serve with, maybe you should reevaluate your service. It's a great honor to be a servant, but many people look down on the position, deeming it as a lower class. Usually when somebody says you're a servant, it's kind of a put down if they're not talking about the Lord. And a lot of people look down on it, but it's a noble cause, because we have a noble master. We can take pride in that position. When military personnel serve a country that they're proud of, they're proud to be of service in that country. When you go to a church that you love, you're proud to be a member of that church. And the only time that a servant is a shameful occupation is when you serve an unworthy cause. And while I was reading stuff about servants to help prepare, I came across a quote that I thought was really good, that said a good mark of whether or not you're a servant is how you act when someone treats you like one. And I don't think a lot needs to be added to that thought, because I'm sure you can think of many situations in which somebody's treated you like a servant, and you either took it really good or you took it really bad. And how a servant's remembered, I titled this How a Servant is Known because I said before on the last devotion, I have to have a title with something or I just really forget it. And with this one, it kind of has a double meaning because, in the beginning, a servant is known by their actions by most of the world, but a servant is also known by other servants. And so we're not remembered only by our actions, even though they're very important. But a servant is also remembered most by people who serve with them. You don't really know somebody until you serve with them. Kind of like how you don't know somebody when you're dating them until you marry them. There's just things that you just don't know until you actually marry somebody. And it's the same with a servant. A servant is known by servants. And Jesus was a servant, and we have books devoted to when he was here by people who served with him to write about him. And so that's just kind of my thought that I got from my husband and the Lord. So I hope that you guys enjoyed it as well.